Welcome back to Criminal Law Defenses Explained. In today's episode, we're covering one of the most fascinating and complex defenses in criminal law, the insanity defense. We'll explore the insanity defense, the legal tests involved, and key cases that illustrate how courts interpret and apply it. If you're interested in the intersection of mental health and law, this is a must-watch. What is the insanity defense? The insanity defense is a legal argument used when a defendant claims they were suffering from a mental disorder at the time of committing a crime, which made them incapable of understanding the nature or wrongfulness of their actions. It's not about simply having a mental illness, it's about whether that condition was severe enough to impair the defendant's ability to understand or control their actions. In the UK, the insanity defense is based on the Monadnock rules, a legal standard that has been in place since 1843. Under these rules, the defendant must prove that, at the time of the offense, they were suffering from such a defect of reason, due to a disease of the mind, that they either did not know the nature and quality of their act or did not know that what they were doing was wrong. Let's break this down further. The Monadnock rules explained. Monadnock rules was established in R v. Monadnock, 1843. The rules set the standard for determining legal insanity. The rules require proof that the defendant's mental state prevented them from understanding what they were doing or realizing that it was wrong. This defense doesn't excuse all mental illnesses. It must be a condition that affects the defendant's cognitive function, such as severe psychosis or schizophrenia. R v. Monadnock, 1843. In Monadnock, the defendant believed he was being persecuted and killed someone he mistook for his tormentor. The court ruled that because he was suffering from delusions due to a mental disorder, he was legally insane. The rules from this case have formed the foundation for insanity defenses across many jurisdictions. 1. Defect of reason. The first element of the Monadnock rules is proving a defect of reason. This means the defendant's mental capacity must be so impaired that they cannot think rationally. It's more than a momentary lapse of judgment, it requires evidence of a severe mental impairment. Case example. R v. Clark, 1972. In R v. Clark, the court clarified that the defect must go beyond mere absent-mindedness or confusion. In this case, the defendant, who suffered from depression, accidentally shoplifted items and claimed she had no memory of doing so. The court ruled that her condition did not amount to a defect of reason, as it didn't impair her ability to think rationally to the extent required under the Monadnock rules. 2. Disease of the mind. Next, the defense must show that the defect of reason was caused by a disease of the mind. This is a legal term rather than a medical diagnosis and can include conditions like severe mental illnesses or even physical ailments that impact the brain, such as epilepsy or sleep disorders. Case example. R v. Kemp, 1957. In R v. Kemp, the defendant, who suffered from arteriosclerosis, a condition that affects blood flow to the brain, attacked his wife during a blackout episode. The court held that his condition qualified as a disease of the mind, because it impaired his mental faculties, even though it was a physical illness. 3. Knowledge of the nature and quality of the act. To successfully raise the insanity defense, the defendant must show that, due to their mental disorder, they didn't know the nature and quality of their act. This means they didn't understand what they were doing, such as not realizing they were stabbing someone or harming another person. Case example. R v. Windle, 1952. R v. Windle is a case that demonstrates the limits of this aspect of the insanity defense. Windle killed his wife while suffering from a mental disorder but told police, "I suppose they'll hang me for this," indicating he knew the nature of his actions. The court ruled that, despite his mental condition, his awareness of the crime meant the insanity defense failed. 4. Knowing right from wrong. Finally, the defendant must prove that, due to their mental disorder, they were unable to appreciate that their actions were wrong. This aspect focuses on moral understanding rather than a lack of knowledge about the criminality of the act. Case example. R v. Johnson, 2007. In R v. Johnson, the defendant, who was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, attacked a neighbor. Despite his diagnosis, the court found that he was aware his actions were legally wrong, so the insanity defense did not apply. This highlights how crucial it is for the defense to show a complete loss of moral awareness, not just legal understanding. Modern challenges and reforms. While the Monotone rules still govern insanity defenses in the UK, they have faced significant criticism. Many argue that they don't align with modern psychiatric understanding and that terms like disease of the mind are outdated. There are calls for reform to create a more medically accurate and fair approach for those suffering from severe mental disorders. Some have suggested adopting a diminished responsibility approach, similar to that used in manslaughter cases, which considers the defendant's mental state without the rigid criteria imposed by the Monotone rules. This could offer more flexibility in cases where mental illness plays a significant role. Case studies. Successful and unsuccessful insanity defenses. Let's look at a few recent case studies to illustrate how the insanity defense is applied today. Case Study 1. R versus Hennessy, 1989. In R versus Hennessy, the defendant, a diabetic, committed a crime during a hyperglycemic episode. The court accepted the insanity defense, classifying his condition as a disease of the mind. This case shows how physical conditions impacting the brain can still qualify under the Monotone rules. Case Study 2. R versus Burgess, 1991. R versus Burgess involved a defendant who committed violence during a sleepwalking episode. The court accepted the insanity defense, emphasizing that conditions like sleep disorders, if they impair consciousness, can meet the criteria for disease of the mind. In summary, the insanity defense is a complex and controversial part of criminal law. While it allows for the recognition of severe mental disorders, its strict requirements mean that it's not often successful. Courts look for clear evidence that the defendant lacked awareness of their actions or the understanding that their actions were wrong. Whether it's due to outdated legal language or the challenge of proving the criteria, the insanity defense remains one of the most debated areas in law. If you're interested in other defenses or want to explore more cases, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell for our next episode, where we'll be discussing the diminished responsibility defense. Thanks for watching Criminal Law Defenses Explained. Leave a comment below if you have any questions or cases you'd like us to cover in future episodes. See you next time.